I remember the cold, white gleam of the restaurant's tile floor, the sound of clinking silverware, laughter from tables not meant for me. It was Christmas night in downtown Des Moines. The streets outside were dusted with fresh snow, the kind that made the streetlights shimmer like ornaments in a city pretending to be at peace. I had parked 3 blocks away because the valet was full, trudging through slush with my best coat soaked to the knees, a gift bag in one hand and a box of pastries in the other, the kind Amy liked, from that overpriced French bakery in West Glen. I'd received the invitation that morning. A text, not even from her directly. From Linda. Amy's dinner. 6 p.m. Lou Rue downtown. Dress nice. No, hope you can make it. No, we'd love to see you. Just logistics. Just coordinates. Like I was a contractor showing up for a job. I should have known better. Still, I went. Because that's what I always did. I showed up. When I walked in, I knew I was late. The maitre d' raised an eyebrow when I gave the name. They're already seated, he said, and something in his tone, that subtle performative sympathy, made my stomach sink. I followed him across the floor, past tables of people sharing toasts, holding hands, leaning in close with real laughter, the kind that comes from history. Family. Their table was near the back by the window. I saw them before they saw me. Amy was mid-laugh, her head tilted back, her wine glass raised. Her boyfriend, Sean, was speaking, one hand gesturing broadly. Linda sat with her chin resting in her palm, smiling like the world made perfect sense. Her father, Ron, was there too, in his usual blazer, sipping something brown and expensive. There were 5 plates, all empty. I stood there for a moment, not moving, just watching, just taking it in. Amy spotted me first. She didn't wave, just raised her eyebrows and gestured me over like I was the waiter bringing the next course. Michael, you made it, she said. We thought maybe you got stuck in traffic or something. Sean snorted into his drink. Ron didn't even look up. Linda smiled, but it was the kind you give to a neighbor you don't like when you've been caught gossiping about them. I took the last open seat, the only one without silverware. The waiter appeared within seconds, too quickly. He must have been waiting. He handed me a menu, but I could tell by the way he glanced toward the kitchen that the chef was ready to shut down. Everyone else had eaten. Glasses half full. Crumbs on plates. I hadn't even taken my coat off before Amy reached into her purse and pulled out the bill. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. Here, she said, sliding it toward me across the white linen. I figured I'd cover it, but then realized I left the wrong card in my car. And besides, you can be part of the evening, right? If you cover the bill. Linda burst out laughing. That hard, open laugh I'd only ever heard when her sister was around. Mocking someone's dress or failed marriage. I looked down at the check. $684.17. Lobster tails. A bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape. Dessert. Champagne. I hadn't touched a single bite. I didn't say anything at first. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my wallet, slid in my card. Then I said it one sentence. Calm. Flat. Nothing more. Well, I said, folding the receipt after signing. It's good to know my role is still clear. That was all. Amy blinked, like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Sean looked away. Ron cleared his throat and muttered something about the parking garage. Linda's smile faltered for a moment, then returned. Thinner now, more brittle. I stood, nodded once to the table and walked out. The air outside was cold enough to burn. I welcomed it. The wind cut through the soaked fabric of my coat, and still I didn't move faster. I walked slow, deliberately, the way you do when you realize a part of your life just ended, and you're not quite sure what's supposed to come next. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't replay the dinner in my mind, not right away. I just let the silence settle. But by the time I reached the driveway, the truth had started to congeal. Ugly. Inevitable. They had never seen me as family. Not really. To them, I was a function. Presence. The man who showed up with money and tools, the one who replaced broken heaters and signed permission slips, who nodded at the right moments and paid the invisible toll of being adjacent to their bloodline. I was reliable. predictable, silent. I didn't ask for much. Just a seat at the table. A smile. Maybe a thank you now and then. But they weren't careless. They were calculated. Amy hadn't mixed up the time. She had planned it that way. The empty plates, the late invitation, the check slid across the table like a tip for good behavior. None of it was accidental. It was a ritual, a performance of power, a reminder. They knew I would show up. They knew I would pay. And they knew, more than anything, that I would do it without complaint. Because I always had. Even now I could hear Linda's laughter, sharp and dismissive. Not because the joke was funny, because it was easy, because mocking me in public was safe. And in that moment, I saw it all: every holiday, every family gathering, every group photo where I stood just a little to the side. I saw how Amy's tone changed when her father visited. How Linda never corrected her. How Ron spoke to me like I was Linda's live-in accountant. How Sean never shook my hand, only nodded like we were passing coworkers. They hadn't forgotten me this Christmas. They'd revealed me, and I realized then, with a clarity that struck like a blade, I had never been one of them. Not even close. I was the one who paid the bill. I didn't sleep that night. Linda came home hours after me. I heard her in the kitchen, heels clicking against the tile, the wine bottle uncorked with a quiet pop. She didn't come upstairs. She didn't ask where I went or why I left. And I didn't go down. Instead, I sat in the guest room, the one we used to call the office. Though it had long since become a graveyard for unopened mail, boxes of receipts, broken chargers, and cords that belonged to devices we no longer owned. It smelled like dust and old printer ink. The only light came from a desk lamp with a cracked shade. I pulled out the plastic tub of documents I'd been avoiding for years. Bank statements, insurance policies, old utility bills with Linda's handwriting in the margins. There were folders labeled with everyone's name: Amy's, Ron's, even Sean's. My own folder was thinner than the rest. At first, I was just organizing, looking for something to do with my hands while the rage cooled into something more manageable. But then I found the first one, a joint savings account, opened 5 years ago, my name on it. But I had never seen this form before. The handwriting wasn't mine. The signature next to mine, Michael R. Carter, was shaky, unfamiliar. I stared at it for a long time. It was mine, and yet it wasn't. Someone had traced it, mimicked it, well enough to pass. I dug deeper. A student loan co-signature for Amy, $48,000. Documents from Wells Fargo, addressed to me, but opened and filed by someone else. Interest accumulating. No payments made in the last 8 months. 2 trust accounts. One in Amy's name, one in Sean's. I remembered Linda talking about family gifts. Once, a decade ago. I assumed they were funded by her father, Ron, the ever-wealthy, ever-absent patriarch who moved money around like air. But there was my name again, listed under contributor of record, linked to a checking account I did recognize, mine. Then came the final nail, a lien, filed by the IRS, a letter dated 6 months ago, marked urgent, a second, unopened envelope behind it, the seal still unbroken. I slid a knife under the flap and read the contents slowly, my throat tightening with each word. Unreported assets, suspicious withdrawals, discrepancies requiring review. My name tied to all of it. But the line that broke me, the sentence that turned the air sour, was this: as the sole named guarantor on accounts under investigation, you may be held legally and financially responsible for any resulting penalties. Me, not Linda. Not Ron. Not Amy. Me. I read it 3 times before setting it down. My heart thudded dully in my ears. The overhead light flickered. It had stopped being about pride. This was survival. For years, I thought I was a man keeping a household upright. Quiet strength. Unnoticed support. I paid the bills no one else wanted to see. Repaired things before they became emergencies. I told myself that was enough. That being dependable was a kind of love. That one day Amy would see it. That Linda already did. But it was never about love. It was about leverage. They had built a system that ran on my silence, my reliability, my refusal to look too closely. And while I was off fixing roofs, renewing insurance, wiring money to cover Amy's semester abroad, they were using my name as scaffolding for decisions they never intended to pay for. And I let them. I let it happen because I wanted to be useful, needed, trusted. I had become addicted to their dependence. But now I was cornered. My name was the collateral, my credit the shield, my signature the leash. And if the IRS came down, if the accounts crumbled, I would be the one buried in the rubble. I stared at the pile of papers spread across the desk. Some of them dated back nearly a decade. Others were newer, postmarked from the past 3 months. It had been happening for years. Slowly, quietly, like rot beneath a floorboard. I could have screamed, could have marched into the bedroom, slapped the letter onto the nightstand, demanded answers from the woman I'd protected for 15 years. But I didn't, because the moment I saw that signature, the forged one, the ghost of my name, I understood something deeper than rage. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. They had chosen this, chosen to use me, chosen to keep me blind. And I had played my part perfectly. A week before, I might have excused it, called it a misunderstanding, blamed the system, blamed the paperwork. But after Christmas night, after that dinner, that bill, that laughter, I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't family. I was coverage. The man you list when you need stability. The one who doesn't ask questions, who doesn't walk out, who cleans up quietly after other people's messes. They didn't fear me. They depended on that. So I sat in that room until the sun started to rise. The light from the window stretched across the floor like a wound. I gathered the documents into a single heavy stack. I didn't file them. I didn't hide them. I simply left them on the table. Then I made a list. Not of what I owed, I already knew that number too well. But of every account they had tied to me. Every liability. Every signature. Every transaction I had never approved. I poured myself a cup of stale coffee from the kitchen. Linda's coat still hung by the door, her heels abandoned by the rug. No apology. No explanation. That was fine. I didn't need her words anymore, just her silence. Because now I understood it. It hadn't been passive. It had been complicity. I didn't explode. That would have made it easier for them. If I had shouted, slammed doors, waved documents in their faces, they would have met me with practiced guilt. The kind that fades once the fire cools. They would have called it a moment, a misunderstanding. Begged for a second chance they never planned to use. But I didn't shout. I didn't storm the bedroom with a fistful of forged papers. I didn't accuse Linda of betrayal or Amy of theft. I didn't demand answers. I just acted. Quietly. Deliberately. The same way they had dealt with me all those years. Forms filled out behind closed doors. Payments redirected. Accounts opened and drained, with no one bothering to ask the man whose name was keeping the walls from caving in. I met them on their terms. I made phone calls during lunch breaks, behind closed office doors, speaking in measured tones to people with titles like compliance officer and asset risk advisor. I set up meetings. I requested files. Not as a husband, not as a father, as a guarantor, a name, a man reclaiming ownership of the life they'd spent years mortgaging without permission. At the bank, I shook hands with a man named Carlson. Gray suit, thin smile, the kind of professional who looked at me and saw not a husband in crisis, but a potential liability turned threat. We sat in a glass-walled conference room that smelled like toner and stale air. I had come prepared, folders sorted by date, names highlighted in red. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even frown. I walked through each item with the calm precision of a man who had already grieved what he was about to dismantle. Carlson blinked a little more than necessary, took longer pauses than his confidence could cover. When I slid the student loan documents across the table, he hesitated. "These weren't signed in branch," I said. "The handwriting on the signature line isn't mine. The attached ID scans were taken from an old file, one I submitted 5 years prior for a different account. Your notary stamp is missing. There's no co-signature verification on record." He didn't deny it. Couldn't. When I pointed to the trust accounts, the red flag withdrawals, the unexplained activity linking Amy's name to mine, he took notes without looking me in the eye. "I'd like formal copies of all account actions tied to my name," I said. "From the last 10 years. Carlson cleared his throat. "That's a substantial archive. I'll wait." It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. Each piece of paper in front of me had once been a blind spot, something I'd dismissed, trusted, ignored. Each signature forged in my name had been another weight I carried without knowing. Now I knew, and knowing meant action. Over the next 2 weeks, I rewrote my life in silence. I met with a tax attorney, showed him everything, sat across from him while he calculated penalties, risks, and possible outcomes. He looked at me the way doctors look at a patient who waited too long. "You were too trusting," he said. "No," I replied. "I was too convenient." I filed fraud reports not as a husband seeking justice, but as an entity clearing its record. I revoked powers of attorney I hadn't even known existed. I opened new accounts under names only I could access. I severed links, one by one, quietly, without announcement. Linda didn't notice. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still left dinner on the stove, still scrolled through her phone on the couch each night like nothing had changed. Maybe she assumed I'd let it go. Maybe she counted on my pattern of silence, the same pattern that had carried this family for over a decade. Amy, too, said nothing. She hadn't reached out since Christmas. Not even a thank you for the dinner I paid for. But I saw the notification when the automatic tuition transfer failed. A single email from her university. Subject line, "Payment issue." Her name, my name, the link between them fraying. Then came the meeting. The one they hadn't planned for. Carlson called to confirm it. Said it was standard procedure now, an internal audit triggered by the red flags I'd raised. He invited all named account holders. Linda, Amy, Ron, myself. We met again in that same glass room. But this time I wasn't alone. Amy arrived first, in a cream blazer and boots too clean for winter. She didn't look at me when she sat down, just pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Ron came next, muttering to the receptionist about parking. His tie was crooked. He greeted me with a nod that carried no weight. Linda was last, coat still on, cheeks flushed with confusion. "What's this about?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Carlson entered with 2 folders, thick ones. He laid them on the table, opened the first. Then he began, line by line, transaction by transaction. He spoke in cool, bureaucratic language, but the impact was surgical. Accounts linked without authorization. Signatures inconsistent with verified records. Duplicate withdrawals. Funds rerouted from dormant family trusts to private debit cards. He pointed to charts, emails, audit flags. Amy's fingers tightened around her phone. Linda's breath caught. Ron tried to interrupt. These accounts were opened with full consent. Carlson held up a hand. We found no such documentation. In fact, the authorization process was bypassed. I said nothing, because this was what silence looks like when it turns into steel. For 15 years, they had leaned on my quiet, assumed it was weakness, mistook it for obedience. But now, sitting across from me, they were learning what happens when silence becomes precision. Amy was the first to speak. Her voice sharp. "You're trying to ruin us." I turned to her. Finally, my voice low. "No, I'm just done carrying you." Linda reached for my hand under the table. I didn't move. Carlson handed out the documents. Formal notices, revocations, investigations. Amy's face drained of color. Ron squinted at the legal language, muttering curses under his breath. Linda's eyes found mine, not with anger, with recognition. This was the meeting where everything shifted. Because I wasn't the one in the hot seat anymore. They were. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I didn't walk out of that glass-walled room like some hero in a courtroom drama. That would have been too easy, too cinematic. Instead, I let them sit in it. The quiet, the realization, the ticking sound of a clock mounted above the frosted door. slicing the moment into seconds they'd never get back. Carlson thanked us for our time, handed out one final page, a printed timeline for closure of the accounts, pending verification of restitution. I folded mine, slid it into my coat pocket, and walked past Amy without so much as a glance. She didn't try to stop me. Ron called out something, a question maybe, but his voice sounded far away, muffled, like it had been drained of authority, like he'd finally realized the room no longer tilted in his favor. Linda followed me into the hallway. She said my name twice. I didn't answer. I walked out of that building with the weight of them still behind me, and for the first time in years I felt clean. Not light, not free, but clean, like I had stepped out of something rotting and stood now on cold, solid ground. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a hotel off 235, the kind with beige carpets and chain-locked doors, where the silence hums through the air conditioning vents and no one asks questions at the front desk. I laid on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally took me. When I came back the next morning, Linda was waiting at the table. 2 mugs of coffee, no makeup, hair pulled back, the look of a woman preparing to explain something she knows she can't justify. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I said nothing. I didn't know what Amy was doing. I didn't know about the accounts. Still I said nothing, because she had known. Maybe not the specifics. Maybe not the signatures or the balances or the red flag withdrawals. But she had known the shape of it, the quiet assumption that I would cover whatever needed covering. She had known I was the financial spine of the house. She had known I never asked questions. She had benefited from that silence, and worse, she had passed it on. Taught Amy it was normal. Taught her that men like me existed to fund the lives of women like her. "She made a mistake," Linda said. Her voice was shaking now. "She didn't understand the consequences." "She's 28, I said. It was the first thing I'd said since the bank. Linda flinched. "You understood the consequences," I continued. "When she wanted to study abroad and I said it was too expensive, you told me it was only money. When she wanted the SUV and I said it was too much, you said it was an investment in her safety. You knew. You just didn't want to hear it. I didn't forge your name. But you watched her do it." The words hung in the air like smoke. And then I delivered the final sentence, calm and without hesitation. "I'm done." She stared at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done carrying your life." The divorce wasn't explosive. It was procedural. 2 months of paperwork. Division of assets. Mediation. She cried once during the 3rd meeting with the lawyer. Said she didn't want to lose the history. I almost laughed. What history? The fake Christmas smiles? The whispered reassurances after Amy ignored me in front of guests? The years I spent working overtime while she assured me that one day Amy would come around? No. The only history that mattered was the one she helped write. The one where I was never part of the family, just a man who paid for it. Amy tried to contact me after the accounts were frozen. She sent a single text. "You've ruined everything. You didn't have to go this far." I didn't reply. She called once. I let it ring out. She didn't leave a message. Ron sent an email with legal language pasted into the body. Threats dressed as courtesy. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who responded with a cease and desist. I never heard from him again. Linda moved into her sister's place in West Des Moines. I kept the house, not out of sentiment, but because I had paid for every goddamn nail in the foundation. I stripped it bare, sold the furniture, donated the decor, left only the essentials: a bed, a chair, a desk, silence. I used to believe that sacrifice earned you something: love, loyalty, a place at the table. But I was wrong. Sacrifice earns you nothing when the people you serve refuse to see it. And that's the truth most stepfathers learn too late. We walk in with open hands and end up hollowed out. We offer time, money, love, not to receive gratitude, but in hopes that one day they'll look at us and see what we gave. But they don't. They see a roll, a wallet, a name to forge when the bank asks for guarantees. It wasn't until I stepped away that I saw the full picture. Without my presence, the house collapsed in silence. Amy's tuition unpaid. The trust accounts frozen. The credit lines evaporated. Linda sent me one final letter. Handwritten. For pages. She apologized. She said she never meant for it to go so far. She asked if there was still a chance to build something back. I read it once. Then I burned it in the kitchen sink. Because there was nothing left to build. Not after what they'd used me for. I live differently now. I wake to my own silence. I make coffee in a mug no one else has touched. I work fewer hours. I don't explain myself. I spend money only on things that won't turn around and ask for more. Sometimes, when the night is too still, I wonder if I went too far. If I should have forgiven. If I should have sat them down, explained how it felt to be erased in your own home. But then I remember that night. Christmas. That table. The laughter. The bill slid across the table like I was the waiter they forgot to tip. And I know. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for disrespect. Sometimes all it takes is one calm sentence and one step aside for a system built on your silence to collapse on its own. And when it does, the people who built it will blame the man who walked away, not the ones who taught him he didn't belong. So I'll leave you with this. Was I cruel? Or did I simply return the favor? Tell me, if you were treated like a stranger in your own home, if your name was signed when it was needed and erased when it wasn't, would you have kept paying? Or would you have done what I did? Walked away, and finally called it what it was, the end.